You think you know someone. You think blood makes them loyal. But sometimes the people closest to you are the ones plotting your downfall. This is a story about betrayal, patience, and the kind of revenge that doesn't need violence to leave its mark. This is the story of how my own sister tried to ruin my marriage, and how karma eventually caught up with her. I grew up believing my sister and I shared an unbreakable bond. She was my confidant, my partner in crime, my lifelong friend. We spent countless nights whispering secrets in our shared bedroom, talking about boys' dreams and the future we imagined. I never thought that someday that same person would become my greatest threat. When I met my husband, things changed. It wasn't immediate. At first, my sister seemed excited for me. She met him, smiled, laughed at his jokes, and appeared genuinely happy that I had found someone who cared for me. I let my guard down because, well, he seemed to charm everyone, except my sister, whose eyes sometimes flickered with an emotion I couldn't quite place. The first subtle signs were innocent enough to ignore, or so I thought. She made offhand comments like, "Are you sure he's the one?" Or, "I just hope he treats you well." I brushed them off as sisterly concern. But slowly the comments began to carry an edge. She would mention things he said out of context, twist small details to make him seem untrustworthy, or suggest that he wasn't as committed as I believed. I tried to defend him, but her words had a way of seeding doubt that gnawed at me, especially late at night when the house was quiet, and my own mind was my only company. Then the intrusions began. At first it was harmless, or so I told myself. She would drop by unannounced, always managing to turn the conversation toward my husband. "I saw him with a colleague today," she'd say casually, "and they seemed close." Or she'd share anecdotes from mutual friends, spinning them so that my husband came off in a negative light. She made it sound innocent, like she was looking out for me, but the intent was clear. Soon the attacks escalated. Anonymous messages arrived in my husband's inbox, painting me as controlling, manipulative, or dishonest. Social media accounts were created to make it look like I was flirting with other men or having affairs. My sister's interference spread into every corner of my life. I was exhausted, confused, constantly questioning what was real and what was her manipulation. It was one morning that I realized the full extent of her betrayal. My husband received a forwarded email from a friend at work, warning him about allegations circulating about me. At first he was stunned, confused. But instead of reacting with anger toward me, he sat me down and calmly said, "We need to get to the bottom of this. We'll face this together." That moment crystallized everything. I wasn't alone. We had a battle ahead and we were going to fight it smart, not emotionally. We began meticulously documenting everything. Every message, every suspicious social media account, every offhand remark that seemed designed to plant doubt was recorded. We created a timeline, noting dates and times. Every subtle attack, every whisper behind our backs was tracked. We didn't confront her. We didn't want her to know that we were aware. The goal was to let her actions continue just enough to expose the truth completely. Meanwhile, my sister's behavior grew bolder. She began sowing division among our family. She told our parents that my husband was distant, that I was unhappy in my marriage, and that I was being naive about the people around me. Friends started questioning things they had never questioned before. I could see it happening, like shadows moving behind the scenes, but I kept my composure. I knew that the more she tried to manipulate, the more evidence we were collecting. There were moments I doubted myself. Late at night, I would lie awake, questioning whether I had missed signs or if my own insecurities were giving her power over me. But my husband's unwavering support became my anchor. He reminded me of the person I truly was, the life we had built together, and the fact that no one could destroy that unless I allowed it. Together we became patient, methodical, and vigilant. And then came the turning point. It wasn't a grand confrontation or a dramatic revelation. It was subtle, like most karma tends to be. My sister's husband began noticing her erratic behavior. The lies, the manipulations, the constant interference in my life. He was aware of at least some of it, and he was done. Arguments turned into confrontations, accusations into heated fights. The tension at home became unbearable for her own family, and the cracks she had been hiding for years were finally visible to everyone around her. She didn't just lose influence, she lost credibility. Friends and family who had once been swayed by her half-truths began seeing patterns, inconsistencies, and lies. The very techniques she used to destabilize my marriage started backfiring, and the fallout reached her own household. Her husband filed for divorce. It was swift, decisive, and final. The woman who had once tried so hard to destroy my happiness now faced the collapse of her own life. I watched from a distance, not with glee but with a sense of justice restored. The karma was not immediate. It had taken years of manipulation to build. But when it struck, it was irreversible. Through it all, I realized something crucial. The people who try to ruin others often fail because they underestimate the power of truth, patience, and strategic action. My marriage survived because we stayed united, because we did not allow ourselves to be baited into emotional reactions, and because we trusted the foundation we had built together. Even now, years later, the scars remain. My sister and I have minimal contact, and what little interaction exists is strained and hollow. But I am married, still happy, and secure in the knowledge that integrity and perseverance can overcome even the closest betrayal. My sister's downfall was a lesson, harsh but undeniable. You cannot control the lives of others, and when you try, you often lose control of your own. The next chapter of my life, and inadvertently my sister's, was defined by a subtle but undeniable escalation. After her husband filed for divorce, I expected a period of quiet, a slow unraveling, but what I didn't anticipate was how recklessly she would double down on her efforts to control everything around her. Even in her own home, she became volatile. Every small disagreement became a storm. Friends began to notice how she manipulated situations, how she twisted words and events to place herself in the center of conflict. Invitations to gatherings were declined by people who once sought her company, often citing discomfort or distrust. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her social circle shrank. Meanwhile, my marriage strengthened in ways I hadn't expected. My husband and I had endured the pressure together, and the ordeal had forged a bond that went deeper than routine love. Every attack from my sister became a lesson in patience and clarity. I learned to see through her schemes without reacting emotionally. I learned to trust my instincts, and more importantly, I learned that sometimes the most effective action is restraint. Yet she didn't stop. She moved on to more audacious attempts to interfere in my life, thinking she could regain the power she had lost. She reached out to mutual friends with dramatic stories about me supposedly being unhappy, controlling, or deceitful. She tried to convince them that I had changed, that my marriage had made me selfish. She even attempted to disrupt family events, arriving uninvited, loudly questioning the decisions of my husband and me. It was exhausting to watch. I had to constantly remind myself not to let her chaos seep into my own world. One evening, after yet another confrontation where she had loudly accused me of alienating our family, I realized just how far she had isolated herself. Her own lies and manipulations had built walls around her. Her friends were wary, her family was cautious, her reputation, once solid, was eroding rapidly. And in her desperation, she began making reckless decisions. Her career too started to unravel. While I had no desire to interfere with her professional life, the patterns of behavior that made her toxic at home were beginning to leak into the workplace. Colleagues noted her mood swings, her tendency to gossip, and her inability to accept responsibility. Slowly, promotions were passed over, opportunities evaporated, and whispers followed her wherever she went. She tried to blame me, claiming that I had somehow influenced people against her. But by this time, the truth of her own choices was undeniable, and the world could see it. Watching her self-destruction unfold was strangely cathartic. Not because I wished ill upon her, but because it proved a principle I had long held. The truth has a way of surfacing, and when someone spends years trying to manipulate others, the eventual consequences are inevitable. It was not instantaneous and it was not spectacular, but it was thorough and relentless. There were moments when I wondered if reconciliation was possible. I thought about the childhood we had shared, the nights whispering secrets, the bonds we had formed. But each attempt to reach out was met with defensiveness, blame, or more attempts at manipulation. I realized that the person I once knew no longer existed. She had chosen the path of chaos and deceit, and it was a path that would lead her to solitude. In the midst of all this, my husband remained my anchor. Our life continued, built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. The house we had purchased became a sanctuary, a place free from her interference. Every time she attempted to intrude, she was met with polite but firm boundaries. And every boundary she crossed only served to reinforce my resolve. Protect what you have built, and do not allow others to destabilize your peace. By the time the divorce was finalized, Her life was unrecognizable compared to the one she had tried to destroy. She had lost the support of friends, the partnership of her husband, and the respect of her family. It was as if the very energy she had poured into manipulating others had been redirected inward, leaving only chaos in its wake. It's tempting to say that I felt triumph, but the truth is more subtle. I felt relief, clarity, and a quiet sense of vindication. The lesson was clear. The people who try to control others often fail because they underestimate the resilience, intelligence, and patience of those they target. My sister's downfall was not the result of revenge on my part. It was the natural outcome of the choices she made. I have never sought to gloat or punish her further. What happened was enough. Karma, patience, and the slow unfolding of truth proved to be more effective than any action I could have taken. My marriage, stronger than ever, fortified by the trials we had endured together. The scars remain, yes, but they are reminders that life is a balance of trust, vigilance, and the courage to stand firm. Betrayal can come from anyone, even those we call family, but it does not define us. What defines us is how we respond, how we protect the lives we have built, and how we let the consequences of betrayal find the betrayer. By the time the final months rolled around, my sister's life had become a shadow of what it once was. She moved through each day with an anxious energy, as if bracing for the next confrontation or trying to manipulate someone else into supporting her crumbling world. But there were fewer and fewer people to sway. Friends who had once been loyal now kept their distance, wary of the chaos she carried with her everywhere she went. Family members, including our parents, had grown cautious, no longer taking her accusations at face value. Even her own husband, who had endured her manipulations for years, was gone, finalizing a divorce that would free him from the storm she had created in their lives. Watching her unravel was surreal. I had lived through years of subtle attacks, whispers meant to plant doubt, and overt attempts to interfere in my marriage, yet I never imagined that her own downfall would mirror the chaos she tried to inflict on me. It was as though the universe itself was correcting the imbalance she had created. Every lie she had spun, every rumor she had whispered, had a way of coming full circle, leaving her isolated and exposed. It didn't happen overnight. She had to dig the holes herself. Every desperate attempt to regain control, every manipulation, every attempt to turn others against me, backfired. Some friends, initially taken in by her dramatic stories, began noticing inconsistencies. They noticed patterns, a way her words and actions always served her own narrative. Slowly they stepped back. Others confronted her directly, refusing to be pulled into conflicts that weren't theirs. Even casual acquaintances learned to mistrust her subtle insinuations, sensing the tension that always followed her. Meanwhile, my life continued steadily, almost quietly, though with an inner sense of satisfaction that only comes from surviving betrayal. My husband and I strengthened our routines, our communication, and our trust. Every moment we spent together reminded me of why we had chosen each other, why our foundation was unshakable. Our home became a sanctuary, a safe space from the manipulation, gossip, and chaos that had threatened to infiltrate our lives. Eventually, the final confrontation came, not as a dramatic showdown, but as an inevitable reckoning. At a family gathering, she attempted to deflect attention, spinning a story about how I supposedly had been controlling or cold, trying to turn the relatives against me. But by then, her credibility had been eroded for so long that her words landed flat. My husband quietly stood beside me, calm and reassuring. Other family members, now aware of the manipulations, met her accusations with silence or gentle questioning, exposing the gaps in her narrative. The confrontation was subtle but powerful. Truth had triumphed without a single harsh word from me. Her life, once seemingly enviable, had become a series of losses. The marriage she had tried to protect through manipulation was gone. Her friendships had eroded. Her standing with family was diminished. She had aimed to ruin my happiness, but in the end she had orchestrated her own isolation. It was a slow, relentless justice that no act of vengeance could have replicated. Through all of this, I learned the most important lessons about betrayal, trust, and resilience. Family ties do not guarantee loyalty. Some people, even those closest to you, are capable of deep and persistent harm. But patience, documentation, and maintaining your own integrity can withstand the most insidious attacks. My marriage survived because we faced every challenge together, without letting fear or doubt control our decisions. I don't gloat over her losses. I don't celebrate her misfortune. What I do recognize is the balance restored by truth. The scars of her betrayal remain in memory, but they serve as reminders of vigilance, strength, and the power of facing adversity without compromising your values. Now, years later, my life is stable, fulfilling, and peaceful. My sister's life is fragmented, defined by the consequences of her own actions. I am married, happy, and free from the manipulations that once threatened to destroy my marriage. And through it all, I know this. You cannot control the lives of others, but you can protect your own. You cannot force justice, but truth has a way of prevailing. And sometimes, the most effective revenge is simply living well while the betrayer collapses under the weight of their own choices. For anyone listening who has faced betrayal from someone they love, know this. Patience, clarity, and trust in yourself and those who truly support you are more powerful than anger or retaliation. Keep records. Protect your life. Stand firm. And let the consequences of betrayal find the betrayer. Because in the end, life has a way of restoring balance, often in ways more thorough and enduring than we could ever imagine.